Greetings, developers. With the dawn of the new year on us in 2024, I think it would be only fitting for me to restart and remaster the tutorial content on my channel. Especially with the beginner series stuff, it's really just not great and to the standard that I'd want for the people watching it. So I think what better way than to just redo it all and then go even further with the advanced topics. Especially because I have a better knowledge of programming in general, so I feel like I can do a better job of telling you guys about stuff. So, as usual, we'll just do one-for-one coverage just like I did in the beginning series, and try to make it more short form so it's easier to watch. In this case, we will be covering variables and functions. So, let's go into a new server script in server script service, and then we can talk about that. And one thing to have is the output. If you do not have this open, you can go to View, and then I think it's the second to the left on the top row. But anyways, so variables, what are they? They're commonly referred to as a box. Now, what do we know about boxes regularly in day-to-day life is that we can put things inside of them and carry the box around and the box will hold those objects. Well, that's pretty similar to how a variable works. So in this case, if we want to make a variable, we're going to type in the local keyword, which is going to define it locally in this scope. And we don't have to worry about that term, but we'll type local, and then variables can actually have whatever name we want. We can smash your keyboard, call it hot dog, anything. So in this case, I'm just going to call it box, and then a variable can basically hold any sort of data that we want to give it. Commonly in programming, there are ints, numbers in Roblox Lua, or floats in regular programming languages, is what they're referred to. Bools, which is true or false, or string. These are the four fundamental data values or data types that you'll see, or just the four fundamental values that you'll see, the values. So we can hold that in our box, as you saw, or we can even hold stuff like when you open up in your Explorer, you open up the workspace and you see this base plate. You can store the workspace.base plate. So for now, let's actually make a few variables and have local box hold the base plate. And typically also, when you make a variable, you want the name to be relevant to what it's holding. So I'm actually going to call this base plate, and we're going to call this second one mynum equals 13, local mystring equals hello there. And also, one thing is there's something called a style guide, and to follow that, we use, I believe it is camel case, if I'm not wrong. I could be wrong there. But basically, the first word in your names will be always lowercase, and then second and beyond will be uppercase. And then, yeah, so we're going to have one more local mybool equals true. And so these are variables, and there's also something called a print statement, and whatever we put in here will be printed. So we can put the baseplate.name, which this returns a string, and then it'll print a string. As you can see, baseplate gets printed, but we'll use that. And then here are variables. Yeah, how can we use them? Well, that's where we get into functions. To make a function, we'll type that local keyword again, but this time we'll have a word called function. And then just like with variables, functions can have whatever name we want. And I've honestly battled between the naming schemes. People like, I forget if it's better practice, but the naming schemes could be like this, or it's like purely uppercase. So it's like myfunc. For the sake of the tutorial, I'll just have it fully uppercase. And if anybody that remembers the style guide, because I'm forgetting that, please correct me so I can get that better for future tutorials. But for this, we'll have this function. And there are a few fundamentals of functions. So when we run this script, if we have a print hello, if we run the script, that hello is not going to happen. Now it's like, but the code's not running. How do we access it? So this is a block of code that is inside of this function, stored entirely in what we call a scope. This function scope is not the same as this regular scope of our variables. See, it makes its own like local scope where things that happen only happen inside the function. So if we declare a variable, so local function box equals box. Function box, as you can see, cannot be accessed outside of the function. Now, if we want to print function box, and then we can also print my box or my bool. So we can print my string. How do we run this code though? Because if we just try to run this, then nothing's going to happen. Well, there is something called function calls, which is how we make the magic happen. So with the Lua U compiler, there is only one way we can call functions, and that is from below their declaration. This is called a function declaration, what we did here. So congratulations. If you're following along, you have made your first function, if this is your introduction to programming. Now we need to call it. And it's very simple to do so. We'll just retype the name with a pair of open and closed parentheses. We can't do this below. We can't have the function declaration below the caller. We could hover over it and it says unknown global myfunc. It's just how the interpreter works. But now if we run this, we'll see box and hello there appear, and our code is officially ran. So congratulations, you have made and called your first function and had the code run. What else can we do with it? Because this is pretty limited. I mean, you can't really do much with this in terms of making games. When you can make a variable, print it, or use it, and then use stuff you've made outside of the function. Well, thankfully, there is something we can do with these parentheses. There's a reason they are there. There is something called function arguments, or parameters. And basically, we can write, let's give a number. So what is this doing? Well, if we print number, this parameter itself is now kind of like a variable. Basically, we have this thing that the function basically is getting when it runs off startup. So this number no longer needs to be made as a variable inside of the function. It's data that is passed to it when you call it. So what that means is we can go into myfunc, and then we can pass in mynum, and then it's going to be one-to-one with the parameters. In the same order we list them in the function, we pass them in that order. So here we have mynum, and that's our only parameter. And then as you can see, 13 will be printed. Well, if we can have as many parameters as we want, so we can have bool string. We'll shorten that to str because string is an actual type of data, and then base plate. And so we can pass in all of our variables we've made. This is going to allow us to print bool, print string. And here's where it gets crazy is we now have this base plate in this function. So now we can actually do stuff to the base plate in the function. We can print the baseplate.name. We can make the baseplate.brickcolor equal brickcolor.new. And what this will do is it'll change the color of a part based on its brick color. If you go into the properties of a part, you'll see this brick color here, and that's one of these colors. We can change the brick color through script doing that, and then suddenly we have changes that can happen inside the function, as well as having all of our stuff printed. So we can start to see that functions allow variables to provide a lot of power to our code. And in general, in programming, functions just allow us to do so much more. And then what we can do is we can give functions reason. Typically, when I make a function, I try to make its name correspond to what it's going to do. And that makes it easier to self-document, makes it easier to document in comments, which is two of these dashes. And then of this line of code will be ignored when you run the code. So this function does random stuff, right? But then we can make add, and we can give the parameters of the function num1, num2, and then we can pass in 3 and 4, or 3 and 4, and then we can print num1 plus, so let's first make a variable, local added, or local sum equals num1 plus num2, and then we have to change our declaration, then we can print the sum, and then just like that, the numbers we passed got added, and we now suddenly have a function which is going to print the sum of any two numbers we give it. So this is a great way to use this stuff. It gets very useful. This is stuff that I use on the daily when I program. So this is why I teach it first, because it is some of the most useful. And I think this is good enough coverage for the first episode. And yeah, so I will get a remaster of the second episode out soon. But one thing I want to preface is practice, 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 and explore. If you really want to dedicate the time to learn this stuff and actually properly learn how to program, you're going to need to practice it. Because eventually, the more you use it, it'll just become muscle memory. And that'll make it so much easier to write your own code on your own without having to look up everything. Because I remember when I was first starting out, I had to look up a lot of stuff. But if you really want to dedicate the time to practice and learn this and perfect your craft, then you will succeed, and that's just the only way to go about it, because otherwise, like, if you only get the information from watching videos and just follow along, you don't truly get to learn the topics and absorb them. So that is my one takeaway for this video, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video, guys. Yeah, bye.